I'm Dr. Christian Conte, author of Walking Through Anger, Your Superior Self.
Yeah, buddy, what's going on, Superior Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Your Superior Self. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are safe. I hope that you guys are practicing social distancing. Please, we got to get through this as a community. We got to get through this together. My wife is an RN, and she is working her butt off with everyone else on the front lines in the healthcare system. Please practice social distancing, and please be smart out there, guys. Today I have a great episode for you. I have Dr. Christian Conte on the show, and it's very motivational, very inspiring. But before I get into that, I want to read for you a chapter out of the book Dropping Ashes on the Buddha, the teaching of Zen Master Sun San. And before I get into this, I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of these names. I'm just saying, I'm sorry, I'm not the best at pronouncing names. But chapter 21, The Great Treasure, goes like this. When Daiju first came to Zen Master Meijo, the master asked, "What do you want from me?" Daiju said, "I want you to teach me the Dharma." "What a fool you are," said Meijo. "You have the greatest treasure in the world within you, and yet you go around asking other people for help. What good is this? I have nothing to give you." Daiju bowed and said, "Please, master, tell me what this treasure is." Meijo said, "Where is your question coming from? This is your treasure. It is precisely what is making you ask this question at this very moment. Everything is stored in this precious treasure house of yours. It is there at your disposal. You can use it as you wish. Nothing is lacking. You are the master of everything. Why then are you running away from yourself and seeking from the things outside?" Upon hearing these words, Daiju attained enlightenment. And I haven't read another paragraph of this book. I've kept it here for like a week, been writing this down everywhere that I can just to kind of remind myself of this story, because that's exactly what I do, or I tend to fall into that pattern where I always look for external successes or external rewards or awards to kind of, I guess, confirm my success or confirm my self-worth. And I'm guilty of this, and I think everyone is, that we have the inner power inside of us, but we don't necessarily look. Maybe we do look. Maybe we just don't do it hard enough. Maybe we don't do it long enough. I don't know. I feel like I have this power inside of me that I can do anything that I want. And I've demonstrated that through instances like this, the podcast, where I started it up from nothing, where I've obtained success in this, and I've, received promotions in my career, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to do this. And sometimes it just doesn't seem enough. And I need to keep telling myself that it is enough, that my work is good enough. And my wife always tells me all the time, you're good enough. I don't know what you're looking for, but it just seems like it's always my nature to keep going for the next thing. And I'm telling you guys, if you do like I do, then it's going to be a long time of suffering, because our minds are not mentally going to be, like, I guess, full, or maybe our spirits aren't going to be full. Like, we're always going to be hungry for the next thing. And I've been reading a lot of spiritual books, a lot of yoga, what else? Buddhist books and Zen books. The Gita, I've been reading that recently, and it really has been helping me kind of calm down and get to a place in my life where I can just do the work and be happy with it and just put my entire being into it. The Bhagavad, I can't even say it. Every time I try to say it, I mess it up, but I'm just going to call it the Gita. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you don't, look it up. It's the Bhagavad Gita, I think it is called. But it tells you there's 4 rules, basically. Find your Dharma, do it full out. Don't worry about the rewards, and put your faith in God. And we have the right to work. We don't have the right to the rewards. We just, you find your true self in that work. Like, you put your entire being into that work, and you don't give a shit about anything else. And that's where you find your true self. That's where you find your true nature, and that is your Dharma. And I am 100% cool with that. I've been trying to practice that a lot, and I feel I've been more free now in my episodes. I've been more free in my creativity than I ever have in my life, and it's a good thing. And you can tell, hopefully, in this interview, I think that it's going to be inspirational for a lot of people. A lot of people are doing some really good things out there, and I'm so happy to be able to bring that to my platform and share that with you guys. So a little bit about today's guest. Dr. Christian Conte is one of the country's most accomplished mental health specialists in the field of anger and emotional management. A familiar figure on TV and radio, he is also a prolific writer, powerful communicator, and sought-after media expert. He was a co-host of the reality show Coaching Bad on Spike TV and The Secret Life of Kids on USA Network. He actually has a really cool story about a super wolf that I'll play a little part of that for you right now.
So here's a cool piece of information. In Yellowstone National Park, they found these wolves, and this one wolf was like the baddest wolf ever. He never lost a fight, so they dubbed him the super wolf. And the biologists, as they're studying him, they saw this thing that blew their mind. See, if you have a German Shepherd or a Pit Bull or something, a lot of times they don't like to give you their belly. Like tougher dogs like to be like, no, I'm not giving you my belly. And that's obviously true with wolves. Well, this wolf, not only would he give his belly to his own pups so that they could pretend like they were winning, but they saw something they never witnessed before, and that was you
listening to the rest of this episode to find out what happens to that super badass wolf. I want to say thank you for downloading. Thank you for hanging out with me. Please leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm in all the podcast platforms, so whatever app you use, find me there. Leave a rating, leave a review. Thank you so much for everything that you guys do for the show. And you don't have to listen to any particular episode. You can skip. You can go to wherever. It's not like they're in order. It's just I just number them so it's easier for me to remember. But guys, thank you so much. You can also follow me on social media, Facebook, Trey Downs, Instagram at TDowns80, and on Twitter at DownsTrey. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Dr. Christian Conte to the show. This is going to be amazing. Please share this episode. Thank you, guys. Christian, thank you for coming on, brother. I've read a little bit of your book so far, and I'm really excited to connect with you tonight.
Man, listen, I love that. I like the down-to-earthness. I like when you tell me I read a little bit of your book. I'd rather that than someone be like, I read every word of your book and never pick it up.
Well, I got to the part about yield theory, and that really intrigued me. I didn't want to go past that because I knew that I was speaking with you tonight, and I really wanted to get it in. And before I dive deeper into it, I wanted to get the basis of it right. So I want to talk about that. But first of all, let's go ahead and start. Like, what's your background? What's your history? You're a doctor. Where did you go to school? What's your background?
Yeah, I have a PhD in counselor education and supervision. I got that back in 2004. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have level 5 anger management specialist. I kind of feel goofy even talking about all the things because it's just, I've always said to people, like, I speak all over the country. I have more than 20,000 hours of clinical experience. And wherever I go to speak, I'm always like, listen, no matter what accolades, it doesn't matter degrees, experience. What matters is if what I say resonates with people or not. So I always I'm always reticent to sit and talk about a huge background, but I think what I'm most passionate about and want to share is of all the work I do work in sports psychology, I do work with organizations, but I'm very passionate about the work I do in the prison system. I specialize in working with people convicted of violent crimes. I co-founded a center for people who had been convicted of violent crimes in California. And then when I moved back to my home state in Pennsylvania, I started to go into the maximum security prisons here. And recently, the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections has adopted yield theory. So I'm now training 10,000 direct staff in my approach. So that's I'm really awesome, excited about it.
That's amazing. So, I mean, what inspired all of this? Like, why, the prison systems, why that path?
Well, so I wish there was a super clear answer for why the prison system, but I can tell you a little bit about my path.
Well, you talked about that in your book, right? Like you said something about your mom was a teacher and.
Exactly. And so I was going to say, when I was writing this book, I really started to think, why am I Why do I do what I do? So when I was young, there were two events. One, my dad told me, like I was a hothead, a goofy teenager. And I said to my dad one day, well, what makes you interested? He was an earth scientist. So I said, what do you like about studying rocks? And he said, well, if you only live on one planet your whole life, don't you think you ought to get to know that planet?
Mm.
I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then, so later when I was in school and I was kind of thinking I was lost and trying to figure out what to study, I thought about his advice, but I turned it inward and I thought, well, I'm only ever going to live with me my entire life. So don't I think I ought to get to know myself?
Mm.
So I started to study psychology and I loved it. I had a passion for it. And then the other piece that was a life event that I think was shaped where I am today is my mom, very strict disciplinarian, to kind of teach her the kids didn't want to have, but then once they had her, they were thankful they had her.
Mm.
Smaller, thin woman, but I'm gonna tell you what, if my mom said something, it goes. So right before I went to high school, she said, "Listen." And I went to school in the 80s. I mean, if you see movies about kids circling up fighting, that was my high school. It was a pretty rough high school. There were fights all the time. And she said, I better never find out you ever watched a fight. So she said, if you see people fighting, you step in, you break it up. Well, I'm a 6 foot, 250 pound bald guy with a beard and tattoos now. But when I was young, I was small. I was skinny and tiny, and I'm thinking, well, I don't want to break this up. Kids are mad. But then I thought, I'm not going home and facing my mom, so I'm going to go ahead and break stuff up. So I think I learned early on that when I see conflict, step toward it, not away from it. Mm-hmm. And I do that to this day. And I lead with compassion. And the prison work, I don't think, as John Donne said, no man is an island. Everyone is a part of the continent. If a clod be washed away, Europe is the less. In other words, we're all in this together. I don't like the idea of what prison is. And, I know a lot of people have opinions on it that have never even been in there. And the reality is, most people who leave prison get out and turn around and come right back. 7 out of 10 across the country. I'm not okay with that. I don't think anybody should be okay with that, but I'm not okay with that number. And what I found was I have a knack for helping guys because my approach is extremely down to earth. Like, I don't give people BS. I'm like, this works. I don't, I know all the fancy stuff to talk about to teach PhD students, but I also try to just break it down so it makes sense for everybody because there's no reason to, give people stuff that doesn't actually work. So.
Have you ever heard of an author named Chris Wilson?
I don't. It doesn't come to mind right
So
away.
he's a Baltimore guy, and he's written a book called The Master Plan. And he was incarcerated, and he was sentenced to life. And he was actually a DC native, and got out of jail on like. I guess shortened his I guess he was thrown in with life with no parole and was able to make parole through a ton of different actions that he did on his own, like getting his degree and things of that nature. And now he's, he wrote the master plan and he's donating it back into the system to help these guys out. When you go in there, what is the morale? Like, do these guys, like Chris Wilson, think that they, the guys, I don't know, like the severity of the areas that you're going in, like if it's the guys with life or if it's the short, I don't know what it is. I've never been.
So I go in, I specialize in work with people convicted of violent crime. So I work with people who've done the most horrific things. I spend a lot of time in like the Hull in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is not what most people think in terms of like a Shawshank Redemption type thing. It is usually it's one of the loudest areas of any institution. Mm-hmm. The cells face each other. I don't know if you've ever been in the maximum security prison, but the doors themselves face so people can kind of what's called gang war on the door all day and scream at each other but they see each other. But anyway, so I work in these places that are very loud, very people, and I work in usually the special units where people have been, failed out of every other program because of how violent they are. So I see some pretty intense stuff. The morale in terms of just prison in general, there's a lot of hopelessness. So recently, I started this movement actually in one of the prisons I was in. I was in a supermax prison, and I started this movement where I said to the guys, and now imagine you go on to you go unit to unit. So what I did was I was speaking. I brought into into institutions to work with staff, to work with inmates, and so I was working with the staff a lot doing these trainings. But then I always talked to inmates, always, but I didn't this particular time at first. Finally, like a couple weeks went by, and I said, "Listen, I want to at least present to the guys." So I did, and then some of the guys asked me if I would go around the whole institution and tell everybody what I was about. So I went block to block during blockout time, and that means this is a small window where guys get to be out on the floor. They're playing games, they're watching TV, and I would just go shut off TV and be like, "All right, let me tell you what I'm all about." So imagine, you go into a maximum security prison and your goal is to help, shine some light on what you're doing there. Imagine what that might feel like. So, but you're shutting off the movie. Maybe that's the only movie they're watching that week. But anyway, I said, so I thought I had to come up with something really that would capture them. So here's what I did. I said, I want to build a movement on three things. And the first thing was this. I said, at the end of somebody's life, have you ever been with someone in hospice? In their final moments, they're not thinking, "Oh man, I wish I got over on so and so. I wish I got away with this." In someone's final moments, they're thinking about peace. And then, so it's true. Like in our last moments, we're going to want peace. And then I said to the guys, "Let me ask you this: if you had a cellmate who said, 'Man, when I get out of here, I'm going to play professional basketball.'" And let's say he said, "Oh, I have a 10-year sentence. When I get out, I'm going to play professional basketball." And you said your first question might be to him, "Okay, when do you practice?" And if he said, "Well, man, I'm not going to touch a ball till I get out of here," you're not going to think he's likely to play, right? You're not going to say, "Oh, man, you have a good chance to play in the NBA." Because if you don't practice, you're not going to get good at it. Well, the same is true with anything in life. We master what we practice. So if we all know that we want peace, why not start practicing peace now? So the first part of this movement was about peace. Like, how do we strive for peace? Like there's so much stuff about guys being tough and this silly stuff that we grew up thinking is alpha. And that becomes our focus. And, it's for young men. I understand. I was obviously there as a young man like that. But why do we allow young men to be leading these institutions with that? Like a lot of gangs are the ones who are in controlling the energy of these institutions. I'm saying, why are we allowing young gang members who are kind of flying off the handle to be the ones who are controlling the energy? Wouldn't we want to have the wisdom? Wouldn't we want the guys who have some wisdom to help shine light and be the ones who control the energy? So hopefully it's making sense. But the first part of it was peace, inner peace. Like, let's strive for inner peace and let's realize we master what we practice. And then two more things. The other thing was education. So I said, not just education about books. That's wonderful. That's great. But also about yourself, like personal growth. Like, let's make this institution about personal growth, not about who can get over on who can get away with what. And then the final thing was legacy. And so I said, you're all gonna leave a legacy, and it doesn't have to be what you've already done. It can be what you do from this moment forward. And then you're a Baltimore guy, so you'll appreciate this. So I started this movement, and I thought, well, you know what? Who better to talk about legacy than one of my best friends, Ray Lewis, living legend. So I called him up. Ray's like, "What's up, Doc?" I say, "Ray, I need you to come in and speak to this prison." Here's how fast Ray, because I love for people to understand what a great person he is. He said, "Doc, what's up?" I said, I want you to come in this prison with me." He said, "When do you want me to come in?" I said, "Actually, I'd love for you to come next week." He said, "What day?" I'm like, "Wednesday." All right, boom, I'm there. So it was that fast. And he came in and he spoke to the guys about legacy. And he joined me in this with what I was doing. I spent 4 months at that prison. But I love Ray. But yeah, inner peace, education, legacy. So now your original question to me, well, what's the morale? You go into a maximum security prison. Well, if all we're talking about is gang banging, acting tough, who can get over on who, well, that's not a real good environment to become your superior self, your higher self. But if we can focus on inner peace, education, and legacy, imagine how that would change the environment.
Um, so legacy, right? Like you were talking, Ray Lewis comes in, like that has to have like an immediate effect on the people in there. Like what are they displaying when they see Ray Lewis walk in?
Listen, there was a great moment, really great moment where so we brought everybody down to the well, first he came with me down to the hall. We went down, went through the prison. And he just sat and talked with guys, and like I love Ray. I mean, it was great. He's come with me into prisons before. We actually did a podcast live, our Tackling Life podcast. We did a live from a maximum security prison a few years ago. But anyway, so he came in. So then we brought everybody to the auditorium, where whoever was coming out for this, and Ray starts talking. And when he was done with his speech, this older gentleman stood up, and he said, I have a life sentence. He said, when I got incarcerated, I said, man, I love that Ray Lewis. He's from Baltimore. This inmate was from Baltimore. He said, I love Ray Lewis. I'm going to meet him one day. He said, my cellmate laughed at me. He said, you got a life sentence. You're never going to meet Ray Lewis. He said, I just want to say I'm meeting you right now, Ray. Ray ran over and shook his hand. It was an unbelievable moment. Unbelievable moment.
That's crazy. That's insane. Like to see someone say something, right? Even like if you're not in prison, but like to say something like that and believe it, and then it happens. I mean, that is powerful.
It is. It's vision. You create a vision, you make it clear, you go after it, but it's pretty inspiring.
No, absolutely. I think that you talk about the visualization, the law of attraction. Like sometimes it's hard to believe in that kind of stuff, but I mean, I'm all in on it, dude. Like I'm telling you right now, like I have seriously, like, I don't have a vision board, but I have like a journal that I write in, and I like to see things happen in my life. And sometimes they do. And it's like, you can't explain it. It just is what it is. The universe, right? It's like, and people that aren't conscious of that, they don't understand it. And, that's why I'm glad that people like you are out here preaching this kind of stuff, because it's like, we need to understand, right? We need to understand more about how we can help ourselves, how we can change our mindset, how we can be more positive, how we can, talk about things that you're talking about, and how we can develop ourselves into either somebody who's coming back into the community from a prison, or somebody who's out there who wants to rededicate their lives to self-improvement. I think, what you're doing is phenomenal, dude.
I appreciate that. And here's why I'm passionate. My tagline for the last 21 years has been, there are two kinds of people in the world. Now you have to imagine, let me set this up. I work with, people in maximum security prisons. I work with celebrities on television. I work with some of the best athletes in the world. And I work with everyday people doing everyday things. And I found that the world boils down to two kinds of people. There are, if you're ready for this, there are people who have issues, and then there are dead people. Mm. So if you're alive, you have issues. So do I. So does everyone. We all have issues.
Well, a lot of it is ego, right? Like it's all ego driven, that false self, that those voices in our heads that we think are our own, but they're not, right? Like, and I think a lot of people fall asleep to that. Like I'm learning more, like the more that I read about neuroscience and things that I can do to help me mentally is, realize that the ego is so fake, man. It's like, it's not even you, who you are. Like the guy who's like, I look at my Facebook memories and I'm looking like 10 years back, and I'm like, good God, man, who is that guy, dude? Like he's got his hat on backwards. He's got, white beaters on. He's like, like ego. God.
Well, it's, and we have, and a part of ego is what's called persona, or persona, multiple masks, the masks that we wear. So these are just the masks that we wear. And for instance, we want to have a mask as a young man of being tough. Like, oh, listen, if I'm tough, here's why we wear that mask. We're afraid. Mm. And when we're afraid, if we say, well, look, if I act tough, if I listen to tough music and I walk tough and I talk tough, then people will be afraid of me, and then I won't have to be afraid. Mm. But as you get older and you become more secure with yourself, you realize you don't have to act like that. And the fact is, that's only more telling that you're insecure when you kind of have that overt persona or mask of having to be tough. So here's a cool piece of information. In Yellowstone National Park, they found these wolves, and this one wolf was like the baddest wolf ever. He never lost a fight, so they dubbed him the super wolf. And the biologists, as they're studying him, they saw this thing that blew their mind. See, if you have a German Shepherd or a Pit Bull or something, a lot of times they don't like to give you their belly. Like tougher dogs like to be like, no, I'm not giving you my belly. And that's obviously true with wolves. Well, this wolf, not only would he give his belly to his own pups so that they could pretend like they were winning, but they saw something they never witnessed before, and that was he would give his belly to the neighboring cubs that weren't even his own so that they could feel like they were winning. And they call him the super wolf. And beyond that, they call him a true alpha. And the reason why they say he's a true alpha is he has nothing left to prove. And that's what an actual alpha is. It's not a matter if it's a male or female. It's a matter of when we have nothing left to prove, then we can be content to see our true self, our essence, or I like the way you phrase it, your superior self.
That's incredible. Like I didn't hear, I have never heard that story before. Like to think that you're so comfortable with who you are that you just know, like you're just like, yeah, I'm good, man. You get on my belly. You know what I mean? Come here, kid.
Yeah,
get on my stomach. Like
exactly. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why I can, I do have more than 20,000 hours of clinical experience, but I talk to people about their beliefs, and people feel very comfortable. And it's two things. One, I will never judge anybody for whatever you believe. We all believe. And two, I'm very comfortable with my own beliefs. So I neither need anyone to ever believe what I believe. I'm not trying to convert anybody, and I'm not going to be converted to anybody's belief system unless it really resonates with me. So when you don't try to control what others think, and you can feel truly comfortable with what you believe, and you can have those conversations with people.
Well, I think people see the authenticity in you, right? Like when they see that excitement, when you're excited about something or a belief, and like you're good with, you feel good in where you're at with it, and that's what converts other people, or that's what makes them believers, is they see the authenticity in you, and they see that excitement in you. You don't necessarily need to say, hey brother, you need to come over here and listen to what I'm listening to. You just say, hey, look, I found this, it works for me. Like I am all in on this. This is X, Y, and Z, and why it's working for me. I'm happy for where you're at and what you're doing, and I want you to succeed, but this is what I'm doing. And if you want to find out more about what I'm doing, come over here.
Yeah.
But what is your philosophy? I mean, let's get into that.
So the approach I created back in 1998. It's now an evidence-based approach. I call it yield theory, and it boils down to this. It's about meeting people where they are, circumventing their fight or flight response, and speaking in ways that can be heard. It's all about leading with compassion and conscious education. So the core of it is this. I spent a lot of time with people who were mandated to be there when counseling, whether it was young teenagers who were in trouble, whether it was people in prisons. And when someone's mandated to speak to somebody, like their fight or flight response of like, why would they want to speak? And what I learned to do long ago, and I've been doing for 21 years now, getting old, is genuinely meet people where they are. A lot of people can put lip service to that and say, oh yeah, that makes sense, or oh yeah, I do that. But do you really meet everyone where they are in every given moment? Because that's the emphasis. The emphasis is saying, so let's say you're having a disagreement with your loved one, and yesterday they told you one thing, and today they're somewhere else. They're thinking something else. If you're still trying to talk to them back to where they were yesterday, then you're not meeting them where they are. To meet somebody where they are is truly, here's my analogy. Let's imagine you and I get up to the top of a mountain, and we get to the top of the mountain and we're like, man, we made it up here. So now we see a bunch of people lost at the bottom of the mountain. So we start screaming at them, you guys should be up here. You should have gone the way we went, and we tell them all these shoulds. They're not even going to hear us because they're at the bottom of the mountain. We're at the top. And if we really want them to hear what we have to say, we have to have the discipline to leave where we are and go meet them where they are. So yield theory is ultimately this. If a bear walked in the room right now your fight or flight would go off. You'd be like, oh boy, I got to either fight this bear,
Mm-hmm.
I can run from it, maybe I'll freeze. So as much as a bear would cause your amygdala, your fight or flight response in your brain, to shoot a message to your adrenal glands and say, watch out. As much as that would happen if a bear walked in the room, the same thing would happen if we did a neurological scan on you if your spouse came in and said, we need to talk. It would send the same adrenaline, same kind. So, and what happens is you become defensive. What do we need to talk about? Let's talk about it now. And so we become defensive, and neurologically, it looks the same. Fight or flight response is triggered. So what I do is this. I say, you can stand on a pedestal and a soapbox and talk at people all you want, and that's great. You can be like, I told so-and-so. Okay, great. You might have told them, but did you speak in a way that they could actually hear it?
Hmm.
So I have dedicated my career to helping. Honestly, sometimes I just say I'm a translator, because I take what you want to say and let's say it in a way that will actually be heard by someone else.
I love that. Before the show started, you said this book titled "Walking Through Anger," which I freaking love. That's a great title.
Thank you.
Is your legacy, right? Like,
it is. This is the 7th book I've written, but this is my legacy book, because yield theory is something that is I started it in 1998. The original metaphor that came to me out of meditation was, imagine a car is driving down the road. They're going the wrong way, and you want to stop them. Well, you can jump in your car and hit them head on, and you'll stop them, but either one or both of you is going to get hurt. But imagine you drove up beside that car, you merged with them at a yield sign, and you yielded with them, and then you're driving along beside them for a while, and they say, well, this is a hypothetical, by the way. So they say, well, this is a long trip, so they let you into their car. So now you start to see things out of their windshield. And then over time, maybe they get tired and they allow you to drive, and now you can help steer them down this a different path, a healthier path. That's the substance of yield theory. Like, can you really see the world through other people's eyes, or at least attempt to see the world through other people's eyes? I think that people can do that when they are watching a movie. I'm seeing it through this character's eyes, or reading a book. I think that people can see it when they empathize with someone. The challenge occurs when you try to see the world through someone's eyes with whom you disagree or are angry. If you're angry at that person, it's very difficult to actually make the effort to see the world from their perspective. But when you do, it radically transforms the way you interact.
I agree 100%. My boy Sean Webb down in North Carolina, I think he's North. I can't remember where he's from. He wrote a book called Mind Hacking Happiness, and he has this philosophy that we can turn our brains around on itself, right? Like, we can realize when we're feeling a certain emotion, and when the self is telling us how to feel. Like, we have these perceptions and expectations, right? We have these expectations of status quo, and then our perceptions are either plus or minus that status quo. And if it's plus, then we're good. If it's negative, then it's bad. And that's what triggers emotions. And to realize that, right? Like, to realize that you have these status quos, that everything has to be at a certain level. Like, my expectations of my wife, my expectations of my children and how they act are at a status quo. And when they're not met, then that's when negative emotions occur. But the same can go about other people. So, like, when you're like in a fight with another person, like, take that, be conscious to that fact. Like, just think, all right, well, then in their mind, like, I'm not meeting that status quo. Like, obviously I've done something to anger them, and that can kind of give you like an idea into their minds and where they're coming from. But you can do that with everyone. I mean, even strangers, right? Like, you do something and they come at you angry, or, like you were talking about the car example. If you cut somebody off, or you don't realize it, and they're angry with you, and it's because you have done something to that status quo. It's either it's in the negative, and it's like realizing that that's where they're coming from. And you're like, maybe you can kind of calm yourself down and be in the moment and take a step back and say, oh, all right, you know what? Obviously I've done something to mess up their equilibrium. I'm going to, either try to communicate with them a little bit better, or, I'm not going to escalate this any further.
So here's the way I phrase that. I talk about the way I talked about two kinds of people. I say there are two worlds that we live in. The one world is what I would call the cartoon world. So that's our world of shoulds. So the car example, let's say someone cuts you off and you say, he shouldn't have cut me off. Or I'm leaving for work. My neighbor should be waving to me when I leave for work. And the boss should really give me credit for the work I do. And so this is a cartoon world, because the reality is the person cuts you off. They did cut you off. Maybe you leave, maybe your neighbor flips you off, and maybe you get to work and the boss gives someone else credit for what you're doing. As long as you align your expectations with that cartoon world, you're going to be let down. But here's the key. The world's not letting you down, because the world is what it is. So the huge part of what I do is teach people how to align their expectations with reality. So I say there's the cartoon world and the real world. And as long as you expect the cartoon world, you're going to be let down. Well, you shouldn't have cut me off. And every should is a cartoon world thought. In other words, you shouldn't have said that. Well, the person did say that. So whether they should or shouldn't have is cartoon. It's la-la. The reality is they did say it. Now the question is, how do you meet that person there? Now, I want to step back for just a second and kind of integrate why I say meet people where they are. The moment you say, oh, this person should have not said that, this person shouldn't have done that, that is not meeting them where they are, because the reality is they did say that. So now where do we go from here, rather than talk about what should have happened or shouldn't have happened? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, what do you do? Like when you, all right, let's say like you and I are having a conversation, and like I say something that angers you, right? And like, obviously I don't know about it, or maybe I do. How do you de-escalate that?
So if it was in my mind and I got angry, then the anger would have nothing to do with you. It would have to do with me. I would have said to myself, well, he shouldn't have said that. And then I would have been angry. But if I align my expectations with reality, I say, you know what, you said something. Oh, I would have chosen for you to say something differently, but that's not the end of the world, and I can handle that. And now it's really hard to be angry when that's your self-talk. I would have liked him to have said something differently, but it's not the end of the world, and I can handle it. Like, can't even say it. I was doing this yield theory seminar a couple weeks ago, and I had people write down. I wrote down like the cartoon world thoughts, the real world thoughts, and I would have them try to say the real world thoughts with the same intensity, and you can't do it because you're like, that was really unfortunate. I would have things to go differently, but it's not the end of the world, and I can handle it. Say it angrily.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine how funny that is. Like to hear them say it in like real world. Oh,
it's funny because you can't maintain that intensity when your language is accurate.
Do you do anything on a daily basis to kind of help you, like prepare you for any type of encounters that would like throw you off your game? Like, is there like a daily ritual?
So I definitely meditate every day. But I think the number one thing that helps me do what I do is, so my yield theory comes down to three things, and then there are three core actions and 7 fundamental components. But one of the 7 fundamental components is called non-attachment. And non-attachment is, it's a profound philosophy that is a huge part of my life. And non-attachment just doesn't mean, oh, I'm not attached to my material things. So, oh, this sweatshirt's my sweatshirt. What if somebody takes my sweatshirt? Oh, now am I less of a person? No, they just took my sweatshirt. I'm not my sweatshirt. Now, as much as we can all know, okay, you're not your sweatshirt. But what about my ideas? What if someone disagrees? Oh, this was my idea. So I think it's fascinating that we believe, or we give lip service, again, to saying things like, oh, I still have more to learn. If you really believe you still have more to learn, then people will not anger you, because the moment someone disagrees with you or says something differently, you go, oh, well, maybe they're seeing something I'm not seeing. And so I've been practicing that for many years. And I practice non-attachment. Like if you were to read it and say, well, I don't like yield theory at all. Okay, great. You don't like it. Like, why is my perspective the definitive perspective on all of life? It's not. Like, if my perspective is simply my perspective. If people see things differently, then I would expect that. That's pretty much human nature. And so that's the daily routine I do. I practice non-attachment all the time. I've been married, my wife and I have been married for 19 years now. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And we are happier than we've ever been. And one of the things that we do is we practice all this stuff. So I've encountered through my last, 21 years in this field, people that teach one thing, but they live a very different life. That is not me. Like I live this message. I'm who you see, whether I do a YouTube video, whether you see me on TV, radio, in my house. A, I'm probably wearing the same thing. Uh, and B, like I'm genuinely practicing this. So I think a lot of people, like, especially when I go in prisons, they'll like people try to test you, and not just inmates, people, officers. I just I live this mentality. I'm not going to teach one thing and live a different way. I'll give you an example. I was driving one day to my center up in South Lake Tahoe, and for guys convicted of violent crimes, and this car was like beeping, horn blasting, coming up on me. So I just slowed down, smiled, let the guy over. Well, I turned into the parking lot of my center, and there's a crowd of guys getting ready to get into the, waiting for me to pull up to open up the building, and this guy pulls in the parking lot, full speed, slams on the brakes. Guy jumps out and he goes, "Oh my goodness, Doc's legit." He said he's legit. He said he's sitting there. He said, "I tried to run him off the road. You know the only thing he did? He slowed down, smiled, and waved." I said, he told me I'd go. I said, "Well, what did you think I was going to do? I was going to jump up and scream at you? Like, I didn't know. I didn't know it was you. I don't know who's anybody, but how do I know you weren't in a hurry? Like, why would I assume that because you're beeping at me that you're wrong? Maybe you needed to maybe you were in a hurry." So I live this philosophy. This is something, and I think that's what my daily routine is. Yes, I meditate. Yes, I practice my self-talk constantly. But I not only meditate and reflect on, but I practice non-attachment all the time. It doesn't mean you can't believe things and believe things intensely, but there's always a recognition that there's more to learn out there.
I like that you communicate clearly with your wife. I think that's huge, right? Like, I think a lot of us don't know how to do that, right? Like my wife and I, we have a really good connection. We can talk, and I can be vulnerable with her, and I can open myself up, and I don't feel like she's attacking me. But it took a lot of work to get there. Like we've been married nine years, and it wasn't always like that, right? Like I'd never really wanted to speak about my feelings because I didn't know how to communicate them. I didn't know how she was going to receive them. I didn't know if she was going to judge me for them. I didn't know what it was going to happen. And it was like, you get to a certain point and you start researching some different literature about how to make your marriage more happier, how to communicate. And that was just my awareness. It was just where I was at in my life. And the one thing I had to get past was being vulnerable. It was being vulnerable to her and allowing her to see me for who I was, and knowing that she's not going to judge me. She loves me for who I am. And, it's tough for guys. I mean, I was that alpha dude, man, for a long time. And it was hard for me. It was very hard. But once you get past that, man, like once you get past that whole idea of, I gotta be a hard ass, you know what I mean? Like I gotta be tough, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I feel like just, you can breathe easier. You can, it's just, you're less stressed. It's like, I don't know about you, but
So much. Yeah, absolutely, so much. I agree with that a ton. And I think honestly, we don't learn when we're kids, as young men. We really don't learn to express what's going on inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, it's tough now too, dude. Like, because we grew up, you and I, in that, our parents were the hard workers, the John Waynes, you don't, I don't know about you, but you don't speak unless spoken to. We don't talk about our feelings. You know what I mean? We don't do that. And the new generation is a little bit different because like now they have Facebook and social media. Not that that's an excuse, but they're used to getting, writing something, a status, and getting immediate feedback from that, right? Like we didn't have that. Like I say, "Hey, Dad, I got this problem." He looks at me and he just like, tell that to your mother.
No, and you know what? You're right. And we didn't. There wasn't open communication about that. And so now, it makes sense that that's something that we have to learn when you get into a relationship. Probably the greatest thing that we've learned for our relationship, like I said, obviously the philosophy of non-attachment, but the other thing is this. This is one of the most powerful things you could ever learn. That's this. Yes, your thoughts contribute to how you're feeling, but the reality is also that your mind always wants to match your body. So let's say you and I down 3 energy drinks really quickly. Well, our heart's going to start racing and we're going to start feeling all the physiological effects of anxiety. And as hard as you're working with everything you're doing, as fast as my schedule is, our mind is likely going to race to say, oh no, was I supposed to do this? Did I miss this? What am I supposed to, like you're going to create an anxious story so that your mind matches your body. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So then here's what happens. The moment we tell ourselves that story, our anxiety, now we're putting more adrenaline, more cortisol in our body, which makes our body more physiological anxious. Now, imagine, and this is what's life-changing, imagine when you really truly embrace every time your body's physiologically off, you look at your wife and say, hey, listen, honey, I'm so sorry. My body feels so agitated and irritable. It has nothing to do with you. I just honestly feel like I'm as agitated as could possibly be. The moment you say it out loud and you just give that little bit, like that moment right there, what I'm just sharing, that's life-changing. Not only, I mean, I've taught that to couples for 20 years, but I've done it with my wife. It's life-changing to be able to look at your loved one and go, look, we're in this life together. This is a day where I don't feel great and my body feels agitated. But here's the part we learned for ourselves. Don't make up a story. Embrace the fact that your body feels agitated. It's not the end of the world, and you will get through it, and you don't need to pick at someone else because you're not feeling good inside.
Yeah, I just think it's being aware to that. Like, well, I don't know. You're just if you're not aware to that, like if you don't know what that is, like you would ignore it.
Right. But I do tons of trainings with officers. And when we do this stuff and I teach this stuff, like I hear from guys all the time going, holy crap, that really wasn't as hard as I thought. And once I said it, it changed everything. Like it's life changing. It's a small thing, but it's a big thing. Like this whole town operated on machinery. This is a made up story. This whole town operated on machinery, and their whole way of life operated on it. And one day the machinery broke down. So since the machinery broke down, they thought, well, we got to hire a consultant. So they hire a consultant. He comes in, he looks at the machinery. He says, all right, my fee's $20 million. You got to pay me up front. So they say, wow, man, that's expensive. We don't really have that. But, we got to come up with it because our whole way of life is broken down. So they pay the man the money. He walks down to the boiler room, pulls out a little tiny hammer. He taps really lightly 3 times on the machine. Boom, machine kicks back on. Everybody in the town's real happy. The machine's working, yay. But then they're like, wait a minute. We paid $20 million for that? All he did was tap 3 times. And so they confront him. And he said, yes, but I knew where to tap. Sometimes I teach these concepts that are like super esoteric if you read them in Jungian literature or something like that, or neuroscience. But then whenever you say it and you make it so much sense, sometimes people just hindsight bias. I already knew that. Oh, yeah, I already do that. And the problem with hindsight bias, the problem with thinking that we already know stuff is then we don't push ourselves to actually do it. So there could be a listener out there that listens to us and says, you know what, these guys make sense. I like this idea. Talk to my wife, talk to my spouse. That makes sense. Okay, cool. But then the next time they're in an argument, they're not actually talking because I already know that. What's our ego say? I already know that. Yeah. Versus, wait, let me practice this in this moment.
But it's all the other shit that you've been like ignoring too, right? When it comes out, like usually when you get into an argument, it's like everything that comes out that you've been holding in is like now it's game on. Now, you know what I mean?
That's great. I did this technique years ago, and I said to this couple, I looked at them, I said, because they did that. They brought up fights for every years past. So I looked at them, I said, listen, I want you guys to fight. And they were like, what? This is a therapy session. I said, I want you to fight this week. Matter of fact, I don't care how much you fight this week. They were like, what? I said, the only thing, I have one rule, and here's my rule for you for 1 week. Just fight about whatever you're fighting about. Don't fight about anything else. So if he didn't do the dishes in that moment, the only thing you're fighting about is not doing the dishes. And if she didn't remember this, that's the only thing you're fighting about. You're not fighting about those. You can only fight about one thing at a time. That couple came back the next week. It was unbelievable. They were like, it was a different couple. It was a different couple because they just took it off the table. Mm-hmm. They said, it's so freeing. No longer are we rehashing everything. Mm-hmm. So it's powerful. Now, let me throw this out there just because this is a podcast. We got lots of listeners. So I was doing my group with guys, this anger management group. And one time a guy goes, man, see, Doc, you got to tell my wife because I keep telling her she got to drop stuff. I said, okay, well, what happened? He said, well, she was mad because I was dancing with this girl. And I was like, okay, well, how long ago was that? And he said, last night. I was like, you didn't even give her a chance to be mad at you yet. Like, how are you gonna throw in? Oh, Dr. Conte said you're not allowed to fight about the past. No, I didn't say that. You're trying to use that to manipulate. Like, she has every right to be mad at you right now. It just happened.
That's almost the present.
Yeah, it's the present. I said, I'm not talking about like if you went through and there was somebody had an affair or something like that. You got to work through it. Now, once you work through it, then it's okay to move on. But it's not okay. It's actually manipulative if you're the one who hurt the other person and you're like, no, we're not supposed to talk about the past. Because if they're talking about the past, it's because they're hurt.
I love that, man. Who did you write this book for? Like, I'm reading some of the excerpts from it now, and it's some good stuff. Like, who was, like, when you're writing this book, like, who did you picture would read it?
My audience was genuinely my statement of two kinds of people. I think anybody who wants personal growth, they're going to be able to pick this up and learn. They're going to flip to a random page and be able to, read one of those. I've put tons of Zen tales that either I've listened to, learned, or made up myself. And they're going to read easy to read stories, but it's for anyone who wants to grow. I specialize in anger management. I'm one of, I think, 4 people in the world who has a level 5 anger management certification.
How do you get that?
Kind of as an honor, I think, really, to get to the highest level. My videos are used all over the world in prisons to help people. So somehow, I guess, it was kind of an honor for them to give that to me.
Who gives that to you? Like level 5?
National Anger Management Association. So obviously you have to do work and go through courses and all that kind of stuff and schooling and all that. Sure. But then and then it stages as you go through each level. But then that last level is kind of cool. It's a beautiful honor. But I don't say it about that. I say it about saying, like, as much as I'm recognized for anger management, if I'm on TV, it's usually the anger management specialist. Mm-hmm. But I say it's emotional management. It's not just anger management.
Sure. Like emotional intelligence, right?
Exactly. Like I said, if somebody's anxious, you would rather lash out in anger than be anxious, because when you're anxious, your body has excess cortisol in it. When you're angry and you lash out, you have endorphins flowing. So it makes sense why we would want to be angry when we're actually anxious. So that's emotional management. If you understand how to handle that anxiety, you don't get to that step of anger.
Some powerful stuff. What book has helped you?
I'm a voracious reader and have been my whole life. So that's a really great question. I love that. I think there were different periods of I love that you just asked that, because I was just talking to our daughter about this. I went through periods of my life where there were different, like, I remember for Hermann Hesse for the longest time was Nikos Kazantzakis and Parlager Kavist were probably 3 authors that I read everything they wrote. But I think Carl Jung was huge for me. And I would say the biggest influences on my own approach were Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, probably the biggest ones, and then Lao Tzu. So I love Sheldon Kopp. There's a guy named Sheldon Kopp. He wrote a book called "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him." It's a wonderful, wonderful book.
What is that about?
Well, so I'm recommending that book, and I'm a practicing Zen Buddhist, so it's a little bit deeper than what the title might,
Sure.
It's actually a Zen saying. So we use this saying in Zen to say this: if even if you meet the Buddha, the enlightened one, the awakened one, the one with maybe all the answers, you might as well kill him because there's nothing he can tell you that you don't already have inside.
Mm.
It's a tale to have you reflect that you do have those answers within. Now, if you're teaching this to young people, oftentimes young people are like, well, then I don't need to listen to anybody or read anything or do anything because I already have all the answers within. And that's ego. That's ego. Because the truth is, we do have the answers within. We do have this divinity within, but we can always learn. Enlightenment comes from anyone, anywhere, at any time. And the more we expose ourselves to, the better chance we can find that spark that helps us.
No,
awake.
absolutely, absolutely. Enlightenment, man. I try to search that for that daily, but I have to do certain things for that. I get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and I go for a run and exercise between 4, 6, and 8 miles, and I have to get these things in. It is essential for me and my mindset. And I come home and I immediately meditate. I have a couple different rituals. Some of them are like Zen, where I try to block out all the thoughts, and then I'll take like a cold shower, and I do these things to prepare myself and try to reach like some certain type of enlightenment for that day. Like, you call it spiritual, you can call it whatever, but it's like when you're firing on all cylinders from your daily rituals, man, there's no better feeling than that, dude.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, I've been an early riser for a long time. Sometimes I think I'm an early riser just because I can't sleep. But maybe I was not designed to sleep.
You know what's funny is like I didn't always be like this. Like, it's funny how we turn into our parents. I used to sleep in a lot, and then my dad would always get up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and do the dishes. And I remember when my wife and I were just started dating, or not just started dating, but we were dating in that dating phase, girlfriend, boyfriend, and we would sleep over at my parents' house from Baltimore, and he would get up at 4 a.m. and do the dishes. Everybody in the house could hear him. I'm like, yeah, why are you doing the dishes at 4 a.m.? Now I'm like getting up at 4 a.m. doing the dishes. I'm like, good God. Like, I don't even realize it. Like, dude, it's like you turn into your parents. It's crazy.
That's great. That's awesome. So how about this? I'll give you a story for enlightenment. This young monk, he was struggling, and the Zen master, he said to him, well, hey, listen, I'm going to a place where you can get enlightenment in a day. Would you like to go? And the young monk's like, what? He said, in a day? He's like, yeah, I'll go. He said, all right, let's go. So they start going and going and going on their travels. They're walking up and through the mountains, and finally the young monk says, so where are we going? And the master looks at him. He says, I didn't tell you? And he said, no, you didn't tell me. He said, oh, we're going to a place called a room with 1,000 demons. And the young monk was like, wait, what? He said, yeah, it's a room with 1,000 demons. He's like, well, what's that? He said, well, it's a room where when you walk inside, you will be immediately met with 1,000 of your worst fears. If you're afraid of heights, you're going to be 2 miles up. If you're afraid of bugs, there are going to be bugs everywhere, zillions of them. And so the young monk's just pale now. He's frozen. His face is just dropped. He's like, whoa, well, what do we do? He says, the master said, well, your goal is to get through that room. And the young monk's just frozen. He said, how in the world can I get through a room like that? The master said, you put one foot in front of the other. Mm. That's Zen. This is Zen. Zen is being present in the moment. Zen is walking through whatever you got to walk through. Whatever those emotions are. You know, gargoyles are put on the outside of medieval Christian churches because people believed, you know, if what you believed was pure consciousness inside or divinity, then to get there, you had to cross a threshold. And that threshold, you see these gargoyles, and you say, what I want so badly that I will go past these gargoyles to get. And this type of spiritual imagery is very powerful.
I didn't know that. That is very powerful. Yeah, that's insane. What
it's transformative, man. It's really transformative. So I love for people to read this book because I tell a lot of stories in there. Like, if you like the way I tell stories, tell tons of stories about that kind of stuff. I try to break stuff down, make it super simple. So let me give you this. I definitely want to give you like the core of what it is. So people, what is all this yield theory stuff? So I told you it's about meeting people where they are, but the essence is this. When you interact with someone, you do three things. You do three things. You listen, you validate, you explore options. Now, we all can say those three things, and we all can say, oh, I know how to listen, or I know how to validate, I know how to explore options. But it's how you listen, it's how you validate, it's how you explore options that matters. So one time this woman came up to me. I was speaking about like 500 mental health specialists a few years ago. This woman came up to me at a break, and she was real condescending. And she looked at me, and she said, so that's your big theory, three things, that's it? And I looked at her and I said, yeah, but if you think about it, all Bruce Lee ever did was move, block, and hit. He did pretty well for himself. Like, just because you know how to move, block, and hit doesn't mean you're as proficient as Bruce Lee. So
What did
yes,
she say after that?
she was just like, it was kind of it was a funny moment. She was not, she was genuinely condescending toward me, which I think I'm easy because I'm like a tattoo guy. I'm usually presenting in a t-shirt and jeans. So
She's like, who's Bruce Lee?
Yes, yeah, seriously. And she kind of just went off after that. But there was a guy standing by listening, and he was like, dude, that was awesome. So honestly, if you think about it, though, I don't mean it. I'm just saying genuinely, that's what you do when you interact. So here's the thing. I think it's easy to be skeptical of others. It's certainly easy to be skeptical of people with whom you disagree. But can you be skeptical of your own ego, of your own thoughts? That's
wow. Yeah, mind blown. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the tough. That you are your own worst critic, right? Like, I mean, I don't know.
Not only that, you are your own worst critic, yes. But let me take it to another level. Can you, if you have a thought and you believe it, if you believe something about your politics, your religion, your philosophy, and you believe it with all of you, can you challenge that? Can you stand in front across from yourself and say, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not the whole answer. Maybe that's not the entire story. Maybe there's something more for me to learn.
And there's also more to that too, right? Because most of the time, like your politics, your religious beliefs is stuff that you've grown up with, right? Like people have influenced your entire life, and you don't like to go against that. It's to go against everyone who has helped raise you.
That's a great point. That's an excellent point.
I mean, it's tough. And to look yourself in the mirror and question that.
Yeah, it is hard. It's very hard.
That is some true enlightenment right there.
It's freeing. It becomes freeing. And it becomes freeing to say, I am not my ideas. That's why, again, I say lots of people like to pay lip service to say, oh, I still have more to learn. Then I say to them, so tell me why you get angry when someone disagrees with your politics. I don't understand. Teach me. Like, because if you really do believe you have more to learn, then how do you know those people don't see it? If I could wind down with one more story, I'd like to share one more thing, the essence of this. So here's when I say listen, validate, explore options. It's how you listen, how you validate, and how you explore options that matters. So when my daughter was 5 years old, she came home with a pamphlet that someone gave her at school. It was a religious pamphlet. It was a different belief from our own. And she said, in the pamphlet, it says, this is the truth. So she gives it to me and she says, hey, Daddy, this must be true, right? Because it says this is the truth. So I took her up to her playroom and I had her lie on the floor on her stomach. And she was 5 at the time. She's 14 now. She was 5 at the time. And I said, so I had her lie on her stomach on the floor, close her eyes. I put a big box in front of her. And I put different objects around each side of the box. So when she opened her eyes, she could only see one side of the box. So I had a little My Little Pony set up. So I said, so what do you see there? She said, My Little Pony. I said, is that true? Yes. Is it truth that there's a My Little Pony there? Yes. Okay, cool. Is it true there's a My Little Pony on every side? Now she was only 5, so she said, yes. So I said, okay. So I scooted her over so she could see 2 sides of the box. I had a little book set up on the other side. She said, oh, it's a book. I said, that's okay. Just because it's a book on this side, does it make it any less true? Is it still true there's a pony over on that side? Yes, that's true, right? So then I said to her, do you think there's a pony in a book on the other 2 sides? And at 5 years old, my little girl said, now, Daddy, I don't know. And I said, that's it. When you can understand that the people who wrote that pamphlet and follow that path, that might very well be truth to them. Just like when you were on one side of the box, you saw that pony and it was truth. but that doesn't necessarily mean it tells the story of the entire box, or even if there is a box. And so the box is something that is, I know people through the years have now been calling it the Conte. I didn't call it that in the book because I thought that was silly to say it. I name it after myself, but just because people have been saying this and things like, oh, the Conte box. I've been doing that Conte box thing. Listen, next time you're in a disagreement with your wife, with your children, think about that box. Think about maybe they're seeing something that you're not seeing, and that's okay. It doesn't know wrong or bad. It doesn't make you less than. That's all ego stuff makes us want to be right. It doesn't make you less than. They're just seeing a perspective that's different from the one you have. And when you can embrace that philosophy, honestly, that's when you live yield. To me, that's what I try to encourage people to live, this yield theory, not just learn it in a book, but live it.
I love it, dude. Christian, how can people connect with you?
I actually, I'd love to tell people about my YouTube channel. I do a YouTube channel. It's a free resource for people. And I feel I'm grateful to be able to connect with people all over the world from that. So, I made a video one time on anxiety, and this guy who was critically injured in a suicide bombing, he said the video really helped him and asked me if I'd make one on PTSD. So I did. And then I was impacted by holy crap, there are people all over the world who I never would have encountered. So YouTube, if you go to YouTube and you type in Dr. Christian Conte, C-O-N-T-E, you can find me on there. I have a website, drchristianconte.com, and then all that social media stuff. I think most of it's all just my full name. So just it's Dr. Christian Conte, C-O-N-T-E.
Where can they get your book at? Amazon?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold, they can get my book. And I definitely would love for people to check it out, because I think can significantly help with personal growth. I mean, I believe it's true for all of us. I can keep coming back to stories and learning from them my entire life. And so I'm excited to tell people this book is easy to read. You can get something from it. You can pick it up right away and get something from it.
I love it, dude. Besides the book, what do you want your legacy to be?
Being a father is the greatest thing in the world to me. A lot of people are like, oh, I can't wait to be a parent. No, listen, this is my life. I love people are like, oh, the day my child was born is the happiest day of my life. My happiest day is today. I get to see her today. Every day of her life is the best day ever. I love being a father. There is no greater legacy in the world than being a father. For me, in my eyes, in my perspective, my side of the box. Our little girl is the most incredible human being we've ever met. She blows my mind all the time. She's just a phenomenally kind person. She's never missed a day of meditation since she was 6.5 years old.
That's incredible.
So we have a 14-year-old who can regulate her emotions in a second. She's compassionate through the roof. So I don't think there's any better legacy. I don't even blink when you ask about that. When it comes to life, then Kaya, our daughter, is definitely true legacy.
Christian, I want to say thank you for joining the show, brother. This has been amazing. Guys, make sure to pick up his book, Walking Through Anger. Christian, dude, thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time to interview him. I really appreciate meeting you. I love your spirit. I could tell from your energy that we would probably just hang out and go grab a beer together. So thank you for having me.
I want to say thank you to Christian for coming on the show and hanging out with us today and really firing us up about his mission. So thank you, Christian, for coming on the show. Thank you so much, guys, for listening and downloading. Please leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcast from. It helps me scale the show. And remember to stay safe, stay well, and if you don't have to, don't go out. Stay home. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'll talk to you later.